Hello and welcome to the lecture. Let's understand what is TCPIP protocol. Let's do a quick recap of what challenge we were stopped at in the previous lecture. Well, Jim computer can connect to internet, Bob computer can connect to internet, and they can find themselves. But the challenge in internet, there are billions of computers, so how to uniquely identify the computers? How Jim computers can identify Bob computer? Okay, so let's solve this challenge by understanding the TCP/IP protocol. Let's take an example of internet, right? In internet, we say there are billions of computers. So how can you uniquely identify them? You can uniquely identify them by giving them a unique number, right? Once you give them a number, okay, then you can uniquely identify them using that number. And this number is basically nothing but an IP address, okay? Every computer have a unique address, that is the number in the internet, which is called as IP address. So every computer that connects to the internet gets this unique address. There cannot be duplicate of unique addresses. There has to be unique addresses when you connect to an internet. Even though you are connecting to the internet via your Wi-Fi, you actually get a dynamic IP address in the internet so that you are identified uniquely in the internet. Okay, so what is IP address stands for? IP stands for Internet Protocol that is used in the internet to communicate between the systems. Once you have an IP address, then you can identify yourself and then the communication can happen. Example could be like a phone number for every SIM. How do you identify a unique phone in the whole world? You have a phone number. And how do you reach to your friends? Like how do you make a call? You call via the phone number. Similarly, in internet, if you want to reach to a computer, you reach via the unique address that is nothing but the IP address. So that solves the challenge of identifying a computer in an internet by assigning each computer an unique address. Let's understand what are the details of his unique address, and this address is called as IP address. So once the IP address is assigned to each of the computers in the internet, now using this protocol called as TCP/IP protocol, they can uniquely identify that particular IP address and then they can establish a connection and transfer the data. Okay, that's the rules of a protocol, that you need to have an IP address first, and that IP, using that IP address, this TCP/IP protocol will communicate, establish the communication and transfer the data. Okay, so every computer in internet has a unique IP address, and TCP/IP is a protocol used to connect and communicate. Remember these definitions of what is IP address, what is a TCP/IP, what is the purpose of TCP/IP, and how IP addresses are assigned to the computers, and why you need to have a unique IP address in the internet is just to find themselves and establish a communication. Okay, so let's understand how the IP address looks like. So IP address is basically unique addresses which is separated with something called as dot. So if you look at here an example, 192.87.45.20, this is a number that is assigned to a computer in the internet, and this is how you represent an IP address. Let's look at an example of what is an IP address. So I have opened up a command prompt. Okay, so how to find my IP address? Okay, you can go to ipconfig. Once you click on ipconfig, you will see something called as IP address. An IP address is separated with a dot, okay, and it has 3 numbers in it. Okay, that's how a IP address is been assigned to a computer, and this is a dynamic number. Whenever I log off from the internet and log in again into the internet, maybe this number will change. Okay, and every computer in the internet has something called as IP address. Okay, and if you have to find an IP address of yahoo.com, you can say www.yahoo.com. okay, you will find the IP address here. Okay, we'll understand what is this and what is this. This we know is an IP address. This is called as host name. So in the next section of what is DNS, we'll understand what is this and how this thing work. But for now, focus on what is the IP address. This is the address using which I can use the yahoo.com server. If you want to ping the google.com, okay, you can find an IP address. However, this will be dynamic for Google because they have many servers, right? So you might be reaching to a different server every time you do a ping. Okay, that's a different concept altogether, but remember for now that every computer in the internet can be found via this something called as IP address, and it looks like this. You have 3 integers dot, then 3 integers dot, 3 integers dot, 3 integers. Okay, so that's how the IP address is used to identify a computer in the internet. So now that you know what is an IP address and how it look like, let's do a quick recap of what is TCP/IP. TCP stands for Transmission Control Protocol and is used to connect and transfer data. Remember this definition of TCP/IP. The purpose of TCP/IP is basically to connect and transfer the data. To connect, it has to find out what is the IP address first. So in order TCP/IP to work, it should know what is the IP address. And IP stands for Internet Protocol, using which any computer can be identified with a unique IP address. We have seen yahoo.com, google.com. By just doing a simple ping or using a command called ipconfig, you can find your own computer IP address. When you are connected your PC to an internet, you will definitely have a unique IP address, and that is nothing but the Internet Protocol. And now you can connect to internet to access other computers and exchange data via the TCP/IP protocol. So how you can access Google, how you can access Yahoo, all these computers that is Google is hosting or Yahoo is hosting can be reachable via the IP address. Alright, so let's go back to Jim and Bob's problem. So now Jim computer can identify Bob computer via a unique IP address. If you look at the diagram here, every computer that is in the internet have a unique IP address, and then the TCP/IP protocol now can work. The transfer of data can work, and each computer can identify itself with a unique number. So the problem of Jim computer identifying the Bob computer is really solved by using the IP address. Okay, with the IP address everyone can reach to any computer that they want. It's similarly to your phone numbers. You can reach to any phone by dialing that phone number. So there's one more challenge attached to this. Well, however, there is one challenge attached to this. Let's understand what is that challenge. Well, it is hard to remember billions of IP addresses. You see, the IP addresses is so funny. Well, IP addresses are hard to remember because these are integers, and if you have billions of computer, you really cannot remember these numbers. And if it is dynamic, let's say you're connecting to internet and then you're logging off, again connecting, then you get a dynamic number. So it's again not a static number, right? It might be dynamic number, or it could be a number that is very hard to remember. So the challenge is, how do you remember these numbers? This number can be remembered via a DNS name, that is the domain name service. Think of how do you store a phone number in your phone, right? There is a phone number, and then in the context you add the name to it. That name is nothing but domain name. Let's understand domain name in the next lecture.